You never want to hit a pedestrian. Obviously, having your hood explode to protect them is a little bit unusual. Oh, it's alive and well here though. Naturally aspirated power in a modern car. Very unusual to see that today. Hi everyone, I'm Kenan from Cars and Bids, and today I'm being self-indulgent again. This is a Lexus LC500 and I have always loved this car as it's something very special. It has a 5-liter naturally aspirated V8 up front, rear-wheel drive, truly striking styling, and one of the best interiors put in any modern car. And in today's video, we're going to be discussing its facts and figures. First, we'll talk about where the LC fits into Lexus's past, then we'll get nerdy and talk about the technical details of this car, and then we'll do what I really want to do and take it for a drive. Before I get going though, this LC500 is currently for sale, being auctioned live on Cars and Bids. This is a 2019 LC500, which means it got the revised suspension compared to the earlier cars. It's also finished in this beautiful shade of infrared over a toasted caramel interior, and it has the touring package. It also touts just 13,200 miles. And after you finish watching this video, click the link in the description below where you can head to the live auction of this one, where you can bid on it and buy it, only on Cars and Bids. We begin the story of the LC500 by first talking about another Lexus coupe that preceded this, the SC. Introduced in 1991, the idea with the SC is that Lexus wanted to have a competitor for other cars from their German rivals, most notably the Mercedes CL class and the BMW 8 Series. This car was supposed to be a two-door coupe that had 4 seats, and so Lexus took the fight to the Germans. The first generation, dubbed the Z30, was powered by 2 engines. You could either have an inline-6, which was the 2JZ-GE, or you could have a V8, which was the 1UZ-FE. Both engines offered ample power for their time, and they were incredibly refined as, well, they were Lexuses, and that was the focus, luxury and refinement. Those cars were both big successes for Lexus, as they would sell over 72,800 examples here in the United States. Due to that car's success, Lexus decided to follow it up with the dubbed Z40, which would come out in 2001. This car was a massive departure from its predecessor, as it looked even more rounded and it had a hardtop convertible, a very rare sight in the early 2000s. Gone was inline-6 power from this car though, as Lexus would focus on only having V8 power for the SC. Although this car was dubbed the worst car in the world ever by Top Gear, the US market didn't agree. Lexus would sell over 72,500 examples of the car before it would go out of production in 2010. And then, in 2012, at the North American International Auto Show, Lexus decided to follow up the SC with a new concept that they called the LF-LC, or Lexus Future Luxury Coupe, and it was stunning. The design was so futuristic and such a departure from the SC that critics were shocked. Everybody believed though that should Lexus put this car into production, it would never look anything like the concept that debuted. But that's not what Lexus was thinking. They wanted to make the production car look as much like the concept car as possible. And if you compare the two side by side, well, Lexus achieved their goal, and in 2018 they would put the LC into production. Lexus would introduce 2 models on debut, the LC500H, which was a hybrid version of this car, and the LC500, which was the naturally aspirated V8 version of this car with no hybrid power. Lexus would introduce a convertible version of this car as well, and the LC remains in production today. It's time to get nerdy, and we begin by talking about the LC500's overall design brief, as Lexus was really focused on 2 things: lightweight and strength. This car would use Lexus's GAL design, or Global Architecture Luxury, which is a platform that was shared between multiple Lexus models, most notably the RC. But the LC would receive some very special touches. On the door shells would be made out of carbon fiber reinforced polymers, which you can see when you open the doors of this car. The trunk also is made out of this carbon fiber reinforced polymer, and it's very visible again when you open the trunk. I don't want to think about what it would cost to replace these in an accident, but you find them here for both strength and, again, lightweight. Lexus would also use lots of aluminum on this car, including in places like the hood, the lower chassis braces, various suspension components, and things like that to keep the weight of this car down. The result is that Lexus claims this car has 60% more torsional rigidity and 35% greater side force rigidity compared to the GS sedan. In terms of lightweight though, well, Lexus was a little bit off on their objective because this car weighs over 4,200 pounds. So although it's not a featherweight sports car, at least it has a very stiff chassis. The last thing I want to talk about overall design-wise with this car before we get to the suspension would be its general look, as I think this car is truly beautiful. It's low and wide, but also very elegant, and well, it looks like the concept car that Lexus wanted it to be. It's also very aerodynamically efficient, and there are two things that I want to point out with this car. The first would be this relief that's located up here on the front bumper. This allows air to flow through the car and across the face of the wheel, which helps clean up the airflow down the side of this car. The other element I want to talk about would be the vent located behind the front doors on this car. Just like the one up front, it allows air to flow through that vent and then out the wheel arch, again, cleaning up the airflow of this car, making it even more efficient. The result is that this car has a drag coefficient of 0.33, which is very low, meaning that although this car looks very beautiful, it's also very efficient with the way it handles air, which aids in things like fuel economy. Okay, it's time to talk about the suspension design of the LC500. Now, engineers were under a lot of pressure from Lexus as Lexus wanted to retain this concept car looking design. And that meant that engineers had to keep the hood line very low, and they had to get creative with the suspension design on this car. The LC500 uses a multi-link suspension design at the front and at the rear. There are no double wishbones here. And the engineer's creativity is most apparent up front. This car uses a double A arm design, meaning there are two little arms at the very top of the suspension unit that suspend it from above, and each of those has ball joints on them. On the lower control arm for this car, there are two additional ball joints located there, meaning this car has 4 ball joints between these components. And Lexus did this intentionally. You see, a normal suspension system usually has 2 ball joints, one from above and one from below. The negative of that design is that under certain conditions, the ball joints can deflect from one another, moving in opposite directions, meaning that the steering doesn't feel as stable and secure as it could. By doubling the number of ball joints in this system, Lexus was able to increase the steering feel and stability on this car at high speed. Lexus also made sure to make these components out of forged aluminum, making sure that they were lightweight and very strong. Lexus engineers reportedly spent 6 months on this upper A-arm design alone, and most of their trouble came from how they were going to affix it to the car, and they came up with a very clever solution. There are individual brackets for both of these A-arms that attach to the strut tower, which allows the suspension design to remain compact, which doesn't impact the hood design and overall aesthetic of this car at all. It also makes this car relatively easy to service, as you don't have to remove the strut in order to replace these components. So yes, it was designed to make sure that this car looked beautiful, but it's also very functional and very clever. Like most modern cars, this car has electronically adjustable dampers, in this case made by KYB. Despite having debuted in 2018, in 2019, Lexus would revise this system, giving these shocks individual compression and rebound settings, which improve the ride quality of the 2019 LC500s more compared to their earlier 2018 counterparts. Moving to the rear of the LC500, the multi-link suspension design continues back here, but Lexus would add something very special. They would add rear wheel steering to this car. As I mentioned before, this car isn't exactly light, and it's not particularly small either. But by adding this rear wheel steering system, Lexus was able to make this car feel and seem smaller than it actually was. Later models of this car could be fitted with the optional dynamic handling package, which tightened the steering ratio at the front of this car, making the whole thing handle even more tightly. But regardless, this car in 2019 had the rear wheel steering system to make it handle very nicely. Before we move on to the star of the show, I wanted to talk about this car's brakes, as they are impressive. Up front, we have massive 6-piston aluminum monoblock calipers, and at the rear, we have 4-piston calipers. Although this car isn't an out-and-out sports car, as I mentioned before, it is very heavy, and so Lexus wanted to give it very ample stopping power, as well, it needs it. Okay, it's time to talk about the main star of the show with this car, and one of the main reasons that it's so attractive, and that would be its V8 engine. This is the 2UR GSE 5-liter naturally aspirated V8. That's right, naturally aspirated power in a modern car. Very unusual to see that today. This engine produces 471 horsepower and 398 foot-pounds of torque. And that's enough to propel this car from 0 to 60 miles an hour in 4.7 seconds. And while those aren't supercar numbers today, that's not the point. Lexus wanted to celebrate the experience of this engine. They wanted to give their clients an amazing sounding, reliable, and still potent V8, and that is exactly what they did with this engine. There are some key components of this engine that I want to discuss in more detail though, and the first would be that this has direct injection and ported fuel injection. Now, it's unusual to have both of those together, but they offer very specific benefits. The main benefit of port injection is that lower RPMs, the air-fuel mixture ratio is optimized, meaning that this car is very efficient on fuel at low speeds. The benefit of direct injection is that the air going into the cylinders of this car stays relatively cool, which reduces the chance of engine knock. The benefit of having these two together is that this engine is able to play with its timing, specifically making it more advanced. It's able to mess with things like cam phasing and valve overlap in order to achieve more efficiency out of this engine and create even more power. The next aspect of this engine I want to talk about would be this little pipe that's located directly in front of me. This is a sound pipe, and it takes vibrations from the induction system and pipes them directly into the cabin. No fake engine noise through the speakers here. Lexus learned this trick from the LFA, and they really wanted to celebrate this engine, as they knew this would be the last time they would make a naturally aspirated engine like this for a performance car. And so they used this little pipe to get even more sound into the car so that all of the occupants of the cabin knew they're experiencing something very special. While we're up here in the engine bay of the LC500, there are two more things I want to talk about, and they have to do with the strut towers. These things are an incredibly unique design, as they again were designed for outright strength, and it's evident just looking at them. They look, well, really strong. Additionally, Lexus wanted to fit chassis bracing to this, and they did so in a number of areas to again make the front of this car really stiff, as that was one of their main focuses: strength and stiffness. The second thing I want to talk about has to do yet again with the design of this car. Because the hood line was so low on this, Lexus was not going to be compliant with pedestrian crash test ratings, and so they had to come up with a solution. And the answer would come in the form of these explosive struts located here on the front of this car and located on the hinges of the hood. The idea is that if you had an impact with a pedestrian, they would explode, raising the hood off of the engine, giving the pedestrian a little bit of cushion to run into. This is kind of an unusual solution, and although you never want to hit a pedestrian, obviously, having your hood explode to protect them is a little bit unusual, but that is how Lexus made this car pedestrian compliant. And now we move inside the LC500, and we have to discuss this car's interior, as it is, in my opinion, the third reason you'd want to buy this car. The first would be debatably the way it looks, because it truly is striking. The next would be its naturally aspirated V8, and the third really should be this interior. Everything in here is beautiful. From the door panels, which are made of leather and beautiful Alcantara and have this gorgeous door handle that just kind of floats there on its own, to the magnesium paddle shifters that are located behind the steering wheel. Everything in this car is beautiful. And even for this car's original MSRP, it punches way, way above that weight class. The next thing I want to discuss would be this car's transmission, as it has a 10-speed automatic compared to the 8-speed automatic that's found in cars like the RCF. First gear on this car is relatively long to get you off the line, but the next gears 2, 3, 4, and 5 are designed to be shorter to give this car the feeling of even faster acceleration and keep it as efficiently as possible on its acceleration curve. The upper gears are more designed for efficiency. They're to give this car better fuel economy when you're cruising around, but those early gears give you the feeling of very snappy acceleration. Lexus would revise this car many times throughout its production cycle, and from 2019 to 2020, Lexus would revise this transmission specifically to make it even smoother and make it a little bit more refined. Not that it isn't in the normal LC500, but they continue to improve on the already excellent transmission. Moving further down the driveline, we have to briefly discuss this car's limited slip differential, as it has just a basic Torsen limited slip diff. There's no fancy electronic differential in this car, just a normal Torsen limited slip that provides power to the rear wheels. The last thing I want to talk about with the interior of this car would be the drive modes. This car has a variety of them, and you choose them by playing with this little Shrek-like ear located to the right of the steering wheel. At your most basic, you have your economy mode, which places an emphasis on fuel economy. You also have a comfort setting for long distance cruising in this car, and then a Sport M Sport Plus setting. As you cycle through these modes, the gauge face on this car is digital, and it will change from each one to let you know that you've shifted modes. But at the very top in Sport Plus, you have a white gauge face design that's supposed to be reminiscent of that found in the LFA. Now, that was included in a variety of Lexuses at the time, but it underscores how special this car is in general, and it underscores how special it is to drive. Okay, it's time to drive the LC500. Now, I've loved this car since the day it came out. I vividly remember seeing it at Amelia Island when it debuted, the same year it debuted, and thinking, I just couldn't believe Lexus was making a car like this. It just looks insane, and it had an NA V8, which was just unbelievable. I thought that NA engines had all but died, but oh, it's alive and well here though. Man, it bangs out those changes early on. That's great. Oh, listen to it. Oh, it's so musical, this engine. Oh, yeah. Wow. Wow, it sounds so good. It's not insanely fast, but again, that's not really the focus with this car. This car is all about experience. It's about enjoying a great sounding engine, but additionally just being able to cruise in luxury. And this interior just drives that home. I think this is one of the best interiors put in any modern car. Yes, it has some quirks. This being an earlier one, it has a little mouse pad to control the infotainment system down here, although later ones it updated to a touchscreen. And it has its quirks, that's for sure. The owner and I were kind of laughing that there's only one cup holder in here, which is kind of obnoxious. Just one of the unusual things with this car. But otherwise, this interior is truly outstanding. Everything is just beautiful. Then there's the exterior design of this car, which I think looks so futuristic and stunning. There's an odd, like, for me, it strikes me the same way as Z8 does when you see them in person. It's like, whoa. It's a whoa sort of car. Like, you just don't expect to see it, and it just sort of really stands out. But it's, if you didn't know what it was necessarily, it might not catch your eye, but for car enthusiasts, it's like, whoa, that's an LC. And it just looks different. This isn't a normal Lexus in that sense. I also have to laugh at the sheer amount of emphasis Lexus places on making this car lightweight, because it is anything but. It's a 2-ton GT car. Like that's its focus. This is not a sports car. And if you're buying this car, you should not expect it to be a sports car or a supercar or anything like that. This is for somebody who's looking for a car that's unique and very refined, but it's not necessarily gonna like blow you away with just sheer outright performance. That said though, it's still not exactly slow, and again, it's all about that sound. Wow, that sound is so good. Oh, long live the V8. Oh, that's so nice. Man, oof, the brakes are excellent too. It really haul this car down. Not a surprise again, they're just so gigantic. Then there's the chassis of this car. As I underscored before, this is a 2019, so it got revised damping, and it rides nicely. This chassis is stiff, but the ride compliance of this car is very good. It feels a lot more like a luxury car, and that's what it's supposed to do. Oh, come on, yeah. I'll tell you what, that once you get going, you're reminded that this is a heavy car. It certainly doesn't feel like a featherweight. But that said, the rear wheel steering does kind of mask the size and weight of this car. You can really very precisely place it. And as I had mentioned earlier, Lexus spent a lot of time in the suspension design of this car to make the steering really precise and have no drama, and it feels very very stable in this car, which is a great feeling. Brakes are nice though. They do definitely work. Wow, and you can just play the throttle like an instrument. Man, that's special. Wow, that's so special. I wish there were more cars that were built like this. And the thing to me, above all of this, that really tops off the experience of this car is that it's a Lexus. And at the end of the day, you know it's going to be a reliable, stout car. And that's what amazes me. You get this incredible build quality, this amazing, Aston Martin-like soundtrack, just styling that's out of this world, and you could use this car every single day, never worry about it. The owner told me he's never had any issues with it. That's not at all surprising. This is an incredible car. I'm so thrilled I got to drive this one. It's my first time driving an LC500, and it lives up to what I'm expecting. No, it's not neck-breakingly fast. No, it's not a supercar. But if you're looking for something that really offers you a very pleasant driving experience and something that rewards you because of its interior and the way this car sounds, man, you'd be hard-pressed to argue with the LC500. This is a comprehensively very good car. And that is the Lexus LC500. I adore this car, as it has an amazing naturally aspirated V8, gorgeous styling, a sensational interior, and, well, it has Toyota/Lexus reliability. And if you've been in the market for one of these, well, you can buy this one on Cars and Bids. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you very soon. Goodbye.